Walter, look at the mess you've made.
I'm sorry, sir.
That's enough, Ethan.
The bucket hit the marble floor like a gunshot. Water exploded across the lobby, splashing onto $300 shoes and designer heels. And for one full second nobody in Callaway Dynamics headquarters breathed. Walter Hayes was already on his knees, 74 years old, his hands shaking as he grabbed the mop before it could roll into the elevator bank. His knee buckled. He caught himself on the edge of the reception desk, grimacing, biting down the pain like he'd done for 28 years. "Are you kidding me right now?" Ethan Callaway's voice cracked across the lobby like a whip. He looked down at his shoes, soaked at the toe, and his face twisted into something ugly. "You just ruined a $4,000 pair of shoes." "I'm sorry, sir. I'll clean it up right now." "You'll clean it up? You should have never had a mop in your hand at your age." Walter froze. His mouth opened, then closed. Around them, employees stopped walking. Phones lowered. Nobody moved to help him up. "You're done. Pack your things." "Please, sir, I have 30 minutes left on my..." "I don't care about your shift. I care that you just humiliated me in front of the entire building." Walter's hands trembled as he reached for the mop again, not to argue, just to finish the job the only way he knew how. And that's when a voice came from behind them, calm, quiet, but somehow louder than everything else in the room. "No." Every head turned. Adrian Callaway stood just inside the revolving doors, his coat still on, his expression unreadable. Nobody had heard him come in. Nobody knew how long he'd been standing there. Ethan's face went pale. I was handling a situation. I saw exactly what you were handling." The room went silent enough to hear the water still dripping off the reception desk. Adrian walked forward, past his son, and knelt beside Walter, his $3,000 suit soaking through at the knee without a flicker of hesitation. "Walter, are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Mr. Callaway. Really, Don't apologize to me. You didn't do anything wrong." He helped the old man to his feet himself, his hands steady under Walter's elbow, and turned back toward his son with a look that made 3 executives near the elevator quietly step back. "Get to my office. Now." "Dad, he broke company property. He could have hurt an investor I was protecting." "I said now." Ethan opened his mouth to argue again, saw something in his father's eyes he didn't recognize, and walked away without another word. Nobody in that lobby said anything for almost a full minute. Maya Brooks, the young receptionist who'd watched the whole thing from behind her desk, finally exhaled and whispered to the security guard beside her, "Did that really just happen?" "I've worked here 6 years, the guard muttered back. "I've never seen Mr. Callaway raise his voice like that. Not once." But what nobody in that building knew, what none of them could possibly guess, was that this moment had been 30 years in the making. That the old man with the shaking hands and the aching knees wasn't just an employee Adrian kept around out of pity. That the real story had started decades earlier, in a different building with a different Adrian, a boy who had nothing. And that Ethan Callaway had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The company had built its name on efficiency. Callaway Dynamics didn't just build software, they built the infrastructure cities depended on, and Adrian Callaway had built all of it from a garage with 2 employees and a laptop that barely ran. Everyone in the industry knew the story. What they didn't know was the version that came before the story. Adrian remembered every employee's name. Every birthday. He ate lunch in the cafeteria most Fridays, sitting with whoever happened to be there, security guards, junior developers, cleaning staff, and he listened like their answers actually mattered to him. Because they did. "Morning, Adrian," the doorman said every day, and every day Adrian answered, "Morning, Frank. How's your daughter's recital going?" That was who Adrian was. Quiet. Watching. Present in ways billionaires weren't supposed to be. Ethan was different, and everyone knew it, even if nobody said it out loud. He wore watches that cost more than most people's cars. He drove into the underground garage in something imported and loud, and he expected the valet to already be waiting. "Where's my car?" he snapped at an intern once, not even looking up from his phone. "I told you 5 minutes ago." "I'm sorry, sir, we're a little short-staffed. I don't care. Figure it out." Small things. Moments nobody clocked as a pattern because each one alone seemed forgivable. He never said thank you to the drivers. Never looked the cleaning staff in the eye. Talked about leadership in every meeting, servant leadership, empowering culture, but had never once asked a junior employee how they were actually doing. And then there was Walter. Employees whispered about him constantly. An old man, slow on his feet, working the same floor for almost 3 decades while younger, faster workers came and went. Why does Mr. Calloway keep him on? They'd murmur near the break room. He's clearly struggling. Anyone else would have been let go years ago. Maybe Adrian just feels sorry for him. Maybe he's got some kind of soft spot. Nobody knew the truth. Nobody except Adrian and Walter himself, and neither of them had ever spoken it out loud inside those walls. It sat between them quietly, in every hallway nod, every small kindness Adrian showed him that seemed disproportionate to a man who cleaned floors. The tension had been building for months before that day in the lobby. Small warning signs everyone ignored because Ethan was, after all, the son, the heir, the future of everything Adrian had built. But that day, everything changed. Because Adrian didn't just witness his son humiliate an old janitor. He witnessed his son reveal exactly who he really was. And now Adrian had to decide what kind of company he actually wanted to leave behind. Not the one with the highest stock price. Not the one with the most impressive boardroom. The one that mattered. If you're feeling the tension already, hit that like button right now because it only gets heavier from here. Ethan sat in his father's office for 11 minutes before Adrian walked in, and every one of those minutes felt like an hour. He kept rehearsing his defense in his head. Investors were watching. The janitor was careless. He'd apologize if he had to, just to move past it. Adrian closed the door behind him. Do you know how long I stood there before you noticed me? Dad, listen, I know it looked bad, but... Answer the question, Ethan. Silence. I stood there for almost 2 full minutes. I watched you call a 74-year-old man useless. Deadweight. In front of 40 employees. He spilled water near investors. What was I supposed to? You were supposed to help him up. Ethan's jaw tightened. I'm trying to protect this company's image. You think humiliating an elderly employee in the middle of the lobby protects this company's image? He's slow, Dad. He's been slow for years. Everyone talks about it. I'm not the only one who thinks he should have retired already. Something shifted in Adrian's face, something colder than Ethan had ever seen directed at him. Is that what you think leadership is? Deciding who's worth keeping around based on how fast they move. That's not what I... Then what did you mean? Ethan had no answer. And in the silence that followed, Adrian said the words that would replay in Ethan's mind for the rest of the year. I built this company so people like Walter would never have to be treated the way I watched my own mother get treated. And you just did it anyway. In my building. In front of everyone. He turned toward the door. I'm not done deciding what happens next. But you need to understand something right now, Ethan. This isn't about shoes. This isn't about investors. This is about who you are when you think no one important is watching. He walked out and left his son alone with a silence louder than anything Ethan had ever heard in his life. Comment below if you think Ethan even understands what he just lost. Because he had no idea it was about to get so much worse. Adrian didn't fire Ethan that day. He didn't say another word to him for the rest of the afternoon, which somehow felt worse than shouting ever could have. Instead, he did something nobody in the building expected. He started asking questions. Quietly. One employee at a time. He called Maya Brooks into a small conference room on the 3rd floor, away from prying eyes, and sat across from her with a notepad he never once wrote on. I need you to be honest with me, he said. Nothing you say leaves this room, and nothing happens to your job because of what you tell me. Do you understand? Maya's hands were folded tightly in her lap. Yes, sir. Has this happened before? With Ethan? She hesitated. Adrian saw it, the flicker of fear behind her eyes, the calculation every employee makes when the boss's son is the subject of the question. Maya, I need the truth. It's not the first time, she said finally quietly. 6 months ago he yelled at a new hire in the mailroom because a package was late. Made her cry in front of everyone. Nobody said anything because he's your son. What else? There was an intern last year. He called him lazy in front of the whole floor because he asked for one afternoon off for a family emergency. The kid quit the next week. Adrian sat back slowly, absorbing every word like a blow he'd been expecting but still couldn't fully brace for. Why didn't anyone come to me? Maya's voice cracked. Because you're the owner, sir, and he's your son. Who are we supposed to tell? You. The question hit harder than she probably meant it to. Adrian nodded slowly, his throat tight. Thank you for telling me. You didn't have to. Is Walter okay? I don't know yet, Adrian admitted. That's what I'm trying to find out. He spoke to the security guard next. Then a warehouse supervisor. Then 2 more junior employees who'd been too afraid to ever say anything out loud. Each story added another piece to a picture Adrian didn't want to see but couldn't ignore anymore. He's been like this for years, one maintenance worker told him bluntly, no longer bothering to soften it. We just learned to stay out of his way. Figured it wasn't our place to say anything. That night, Adrian sat alone in his office long after everyone had gone home, pulling up security footage on the monitor in front of him. Not just from today. He went back months, then years. He watched his son ignore a driver holding an umbrella for him in the rain, walking straight past without a glance. He watched him snap at a barista in the building's cafe over a wrong coffee order. He watched moment after moment stack on top of each other, and none of them were loud enough alone to matter, but together they told him something he'd been too busy, too proud, or too unwilling to admit. He had built an empire. And somewhere along the way, he had raised a stranger. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Mr. Hayes is doing fine. Wanted you to know. Adrian closed his eyes and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. I need to see him, he whispered to no one. Tonight. If you've ever watched someone you trusted show you who they really are when they thought no one was looking, drop a comment below, because this story is about to get even heavier. Walter's house was small, modest, tucked at the end of a quiet street with a porch light that flickered slightly when Adrian knocked. Linda answered the door, surprised to see the most powerful man in the city standing on her welcome mat without an assistant, without a car waiting at the curb, without any of the usual weight that followed him everywhere. Mr. Calloway, she said softly, please come in. Walter was sitting in an armchair, his knee wrapped in ice, and he tried to stand the moment Adrian walked through the door. Please don't get up, Adrian said quickly, crossing the room to sit across from him instead. Please, Walter. The old man settled back slowly, wincing. I'm sorry about today, sir. I should have let the younger staff handle the polishing. I don't know what I was thinking. Stop apologizing to me. I caused a scene in front of your investors. You didn't cause anything. My son did. Adrian's voice was quiet, but there was iron underneath it. You've done nothing wrong. Not today. Not in 28 years. Walter's eyes glistened, and he looked down at his hands, worn and calloused from decades of work most people in that lobby would never think twice about. You've always been kind to me, Walter said. More than kind. I never understood why, not fully, not until... He stopped himself. Until what? Adrian asked. Walter exchanged a glance with Linda, who nodded gently, as if giving permission for something that had been sealed away for a very long time. Wait here, Walter said, and pushed himself up despite the pain, disappearing into the back room. He returned a few minutes later carrying an old wooden box, its corners worn smooth from age, and set it carefully on the coffee table between them. He opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph, faded at the edges, the colors softened by 30 years of time. Adrian's breath caught in his throat. It was him, 7 years old, standing beside his mother, exhausted, thin, wearing the same gray uniform she wore every day cleaning office buildings downtown. And beside them both, a younger Walter, smiling, one hand resting gently on young Adrian's shoulder. You remember, Walter said quietly. Adrian's voice broke. Every single day. I want to know everything, Adrian whispered, staring at the photo like it was the only thing in the world that mattered right now. Tell me all of it. Please. Walter took a slow breath, and for the first time in 30 years, he began to tell the story neither of them had ever spoken about inside those company walls. Your mother worked 18-hour days back then, Walter said, his voice trembling slightly. 2 jobs just to keep food on your table. I was cleaning the same building she worked in. I used to see you sitting alone in the stairwell after school, waiting for her shift to end, doing your homework on the cold concrete steps because you didn't want to bother her. Adrian's jaw tightened, memories rushing back faster than he could process them. I started bringing an extra sandwich every day, Walter continued. Told you it was leftovers I didn't want. You believed me for years. I didn't know, Adrian whispered. I thought you just didn't like turkey. Walter almost laughed, but it came out broken. I fixed your shoes once. The soles had split, and your mother didn't have enough that week to replace them. I told you a coworker left them behind and didn't need them anymore. Adrian's hands were shaking now. And the science competition, Walter said, quieter now, the $20 for the registration fee. That wasn't a scholarship from the school like they told your mother. I paid it myself. Adrian looked up, tears finally breaking free. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because it was never about being thanked, Walter said simply. It was about a boy who deserved a chance nobody was giving him. Like this video right now if you already feel your chest tightening, because what happens next changes everything. The room was quiet for a long moment. Adrian sat there holding the photograph like it might disappear if he let go, 30 years of memory rushing back all at once. When I finally made money, Adrian said slowly, I searched for you. Do you remember that? I remember, Walter said. You found me working a maintenance job across town. I thought you'd come to thank me and walk away. Successful men usually do. I didn't want to thank you and walk away. I wanted you close. I wanted you somewhere I could see you every day, somewhere I could make sure you never had to worry about anything again. I never asked for money, Walter said. I never wanted a promotion. I just wanted to keep working, keep feeling useful. That was enough for me. It was never enough for me, Adrian said, his voice cracking. You saved my mother's son when nobody else even noticed we existed. And today, my own child stood in that lobby and called you dead weight. Walter reached over and placed a weathered hand on Adrian's arm. He doesn't know who I am to you. That's not his fault. No, Adrian said, standing slowly, something hardening behind his eyes. But it is his fault that he thought it was okay to treat anyone that way. Family or not. He looked at Walter one more time before heading for the door. Get some rest. I'll take care of everything. Walter caught his sleeve gently. Adrian, don't do this out of anger. Do it because it's right. Adrian nodded once. It's both. The boardroom the next morning was packed. Every executive Callaway Dynamics employed sat around the long glass table, whispering, uncertain why they'd been summoned with such urgency. Ethan sat near the head of the table, composed, confident, certain this meeting would end with Walter's dismissal finally settled and the whole embarrassing incident buried for good. Adrian walked in last and didn't sit down. I want to talk about leadership, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. Not the kind you learn in business school. The kind you learn from watching how people treat someone who can't do anything for them in return. Ethan shifted slightly in his seat. 30 years ago, my mother cleaned office buildings to keep me fed. I did my homework in stairwells because I had nowhere else to go. And a janitor named Walter Hayes shared his lunch with me every single day and never told a soul. He paused, letting that land. He paid for my science competition out of his own paycheck. He fixed my shoes with his own hands. He is the reason I'm standing in this room today. Gasps rippled quietly across the table. Ethan's face went pale. Yesterday, I watched my son call that man useless in front of 40 employees. Dead weight, he said. In my own lobby. Dad, Ethan started, I didn't know. You didn't ask, Adrian cut in, his voice sharp now. You never ask. You've spent years talking about leadership in every meeting, but leadership isn't a title, Ethan. It's how you treat the person who can do nothing for your career. And you have failed that test more times than you know. I've been watching. The silence in the room was suffocating. I can teach someone the entire business, Adrian said. Every strategy, every deal, every system I built from nothing. But I cannot teach someone to value another human being. Either you already understand it, or you don't. He turned to face his son fully now. I built this company so people like Walter would never be treated as less than. I will not hand it to someone who believes people exist beneath him. Effective immediately, you are removed as executive vice president. Your succession is suspended indefinitely. The room erupted into stunned murmurs. Ethan sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound, the weight of his father's words crushing every certainty he'd walked in with. This isn't the end, Adrian said, quieter now, almost gentle. But you need to earn your place back. Not with your name. With who you become. If this moment hit you as hard as it hit everyone in that boardroom, comment below and let me know, because the ending is where it all comes together. Walter officially retired 3 months later, and the entire company gathered in that same lobby where it had all started, the same marble floor he'd polished for 28 years. Adrian stood beside him as they unveiled a new plaque near the entrance, one that would outlast every stock report the company ever produced. The Walter Hayes Integrity Award, Adrian announced to the crowd, given every year not to the highest performer in this company, but to the kindest one. Walter wiped his eyes as employees applauded, people who had walked past him for years without truly seeing him, now understanding exactly who had been standing among them all along. Ethan spent the following year working anonymously through every department in the company. No executive privileges. No assistant. No title. He stocked warehouse shelves. He sorted mailroom packages. He answered angry customer calls for 8 hours a day and learned, for the first time in his life, what it felt like to be invisible to the people who held power over him. One afternoon, months into that year, an elderly janitor in a different building dropped a bucket near the loading dock. Ethan was there before he even thought about it, kneeling down, picking it up, helping the old man steady himself without a single camera around, without anyone watching, without anything to gain. Word got back to Walter eventually. He simply smiled when he heard it. He finally understands, he said quietly to Linda that evening. A year after the incident in the lobby, Adrian stood in that same spot, watching hundreds of employees walk in for another ordinary day. Nobody noticed the billionaire standing quietly near the doors. But almost everyone glanced up at the portrait hanging beside the company mission statement, the photograph of an old man who had once been dismissed as dead weight, now smiling down on every person who walked beneath it. Below the portrait, simple words remained. The strongest foundation any company can build isn't made of steel or glass. It's built one act of kindness at a time. If this story moved you even a little, make sure you're subscribed, because stories like this one are exactly what this channel is built on. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit you the hardest, hit that like button before you go, and share this with someone who needs the reminder that character always outweighs power. See you in the next one.